Everybody, welcome back to Kiki Loves Nigeria. Hey everybody, on this episode of Kiki Loves Nigeria, we are going to look at some receipts from Miss Lady. Miss Lady wrote me and said she was scammed by Mark Meets Africa. She said she was scammed out of $24,000. So, this is her story. She sent me her receipts. I have attached them in the video. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to listen to Miss Lady's story. Shalom, Kiki. It was suggested to me that I should watch your content and perhaps reach out to you concerning me being scammed by Mark Does Africa for $24,000. This is the second time I saw him called Mark Does Africa. So I'm not sure if that's one of his old names, because when I put Mark Does Africa, because I wanted to make sure we was talking about the right person, when I put in Mark Does Africa, Mark Meets Africa comes up. So I don't know why, they're saying Mark Does Africa. Maybe it was a mistake, a typo, I'm not sure. But when you put it on YouTube, Mark Meets Africa comes up, and the receipts say Merge, which is Mark's company. I live in America, but I am currently in Tanzania for 6 weeks. I understand that you are familiar with Mark. My sister was scammed by Daniel several years ago. I would love to tell you my story, as I think it's time for these scam artists to be stopped. All right, so let's begin the story. So this is how the story goes. So I have been considering moving to Africa for a while, but wasn't sure of what or how to go about it. I was a regular to Pastor Rick Fletcher's channel on the day that I first encountered Mark and his business partner, Oral Gray. They had apparently been on the channel previously because the segment was about lots selling out fast. So I turned in only to realize that people had already purchased lots. So in my mind, I wanted to act fast, unfortunately. Mark and Oral was smiling, happy, engaging, and overall ready to do business and eager to give out the number to merge the company's name. I contacted Oral and asked him to reiterate some of what I previously missed, and that was all she wrote. I purchased what I believe to be 1/8 acre for $1,600 and 1/4 for $800. Now, Merge proposed that the builders would do the building of all the homes. On the 1/8 on the 1/8 acre, Merge was to build a 2-bedroom, 2-bath for $17,000. On the 1/4 acre, 1-bedroom, 1-bath was going to be built that I planned to use for an Airbnb for $12,000. I was elated, to say the least. I sent the $25,000 for the lots. I emailed you a copy. I wanted to pay off the Airbnb first and stay there until the 2-bedroom was finished. Then a week later, I sent Merge $8,000. A week later, $4,000. 1 week later, another $4,000. 1 week later, another $4,000. By this time, the group chat was formed, per my request to Mark, as I was feeling uneasy at this time because merge didn't break ground when they said, and this is when the many excuses started. Sorry, I was increasingly weary and suspicious. By this time, I started letting the other owners in the chat know of my growing suspicion. I called Mark and Oral plenty of times to express to them my discomfort and anxieties. They tried to reassure me, but to no avail. I contacted Pastor Rick to let him know of my suspicions regarding Mark and Oral, but he reassured me that they were stand-up guys, so I proceeded with the chat. However, I wouldn't give them the remaining $9,000 on the two-bedroom because by this time I felt as if I had been scammed. I was very vocal on the chat, so much so that Earl stopped taking my calls and Mark had to bring in a woman named Mama Renee to ease the tension. She focused on scriptures. She impressed upon us how hard Mark and Oral were working and how important it was for us to have, you know what? Patience. Pack your patience. Of course, that's not in there. I had to just throw that in there. Let me get back on track. I grew increasingly agitated with that scenario. Mark came on the chat to reassure us that breaking ground was near, but patience is a virtue. He came up with another excuse, that paperwork was the holdup. A couple of weeks later, it was rainy season. Then the excuse was the roads were too bumpy and the equipment trucks couldn't make it into the land due to the mud from the rainy season. 1 week later, Mark comes to the chat and tells us that he and Earl are no longer partners and that Earl is upset and wants more money. Okay, Kiki, I will continue the story per your request. Until then, be blessed. Shalom, sis. I am a retired senior, and at the time that I was scammed, I had just moved to Wisconsin to care for my mother, who was in stage 4 lung cancer and was given only a few more months to live. And I told Mark and Oral and begged them to not let this be a scam. The apartment that I was in, my lease was to be up that November. And since I purchased land in Africa with Mark and Oral in December of 2023, I was thinking that my place in Africa would be ready by then. And depending on what was going on with my mother, I had no need to look for another apartment. After all, I was a homeowner in Africa. After Mark and Oral fall out, 6 families dropped off, but 6 or 7 of us stayed around, hopeful that things would be resolved. Unfortunately, things got worse. As time went by, we started hearing from the families that dropped off about how they went to their banks to file claims and were given their money back by their respective banks. Since I was one of the first victims who purchased, by the time I went to my bank, I was denied my claim because they said it was too late and that I would have to pursue Mark on my own. He even tried to delete my file, which looked like I never existed. But I contacted Oral, and Oral emailed me all the paperwork to me that Mark deleted. Mark strung me along for months. He stopped taking my calls. Then he kept telling me that his bank paid my bank and how he couldn't help it if my bank screwed up. And then I demanded to see records where his bank sent the money, and no doubt he couldn't provide proof because he was lying. By this time, I was so stressed because Mom now needed 24-hour care and could no longer live alone. I continually tried to recover my money by sending a text and threatening to pursue legal action, but my texts and my calls went unanswered, so I finally gave up and tended to my mother and had to sign another year's lease. FYI, Oral, Mark, T3 and me, Stepping Stones to Home, and several others all learned the scamming thing together. And I think Daniel was a part of it. As a matter of fact, my sister was scammed by Daniel. She is a traveling nurse and had been in Africa several times and wanted to purchase property, so she purchased at Ruby Village and Yaouda Village, and Daniel got mad at her for questioning him. He kicked her out of the group and put her on time out. If you want more of my story, please let me know. Be blessed, sis.